Hello and welcome to Echoes of the Square, the podcast where we're going to explore the sounds, struggles, and stories of people-powered movements from around the world. I'm your host, Teddy Sparrow, and in today's extended episode, we're going to dive into one of the most iconic uprisings of the 21st century, the 2011 Egyptian Revolution. This episode is about more than a protest. It's about memory, hope, betrayal, and resilience. We'll explore what led to that revolution, what happened specifically in Tahrir Square, how Egypt's working class helped shape it, and the complex role of the military. We'll listen to the voices of artists and activists, explore how music and media turned into tools of resistance, and how the world responded. Finally, we'll talk about where Egypt stands now and what it all means today. So sit back, breathe deep, and let's return to the square. To understand the revolution, you need to understand the decades of pressure beneath it. By 2011, Egypt had been under President Hosni Mubarak's rule for nearly 30 years. A former Air Force commander turned authoritarian leader, Mubarak maintained a regime built on fear, patronage, and surveillance. The 1981 emergency law gave the government sweeping powers to arrest, censor, and detain anyone they considered a threat. But beneath the surface, Egypt was boiling. Corruption was endemic. Police brutality was widespread. Education was underfunded, and the economy was rigged to benefit a small elite. Meanwhile, nearly half of Egyptians lived on less than $2 a day. Youth unemployment skyrocketed, graduates were getting no jobs, bread prices were rising, and parents were unable to feed their families. And then there's the internet, sort of a tool of unification. By the late 2000s, Facebook and Twitter were starting to connect people across political, class, and religious lines. But the final spark? Tunisia. When Muhammad Bouazizi set himself on fire to protest of police corruption and humiliation, it ignited a flame across the Arab world. Egyptians saw what Tanzanians had done and believed they could too. The day is January 25th, 2011. Please stay in Egypt. But this year, the streets told a different story. Thousands took to the streets of Cairo, Alexandria, Suez, and more. Their chant? Bread, freedom, social justice. And in the heart of Cairo, Tahrir Square transformed. Tents, banners, giant puppet figurines of Mubarak, protesters charging their phones on makeshift solar panels just to stay as long as they could. There's medics treating the wounded, volunteers out distributing food to all the hungry, poets and artists and singers performing on makeshift stages, mosques and churches providing sanctuary. The revolution was igniting, a fire within. It was a revolutionary city within a city. And people didn't come just to protest. They came to build something, an Egyptian culture, an identity, something that they could rely on. And they came to the streets to take down this regime in Mubarak. Social media played a massive role. Pages like We Are All Salid Said, named after a young man beaten to death by police, rallied people. Twitter hashtags like #Jan21st trended globally. People live streamed from the square, giving the world a front row seat. And how did the regime respond? With internet blackouts, shutting down media and communications. But by then, the message was out. The Egyptians were angry. Going to go into the drivers of the revolution. While the revolution was often portrayed in media as being driven by middle-class youth and tech-savvy activists, the truth is broader and deeper. The Egyptian working class had been organizing long before 2011, usually the lower class people. In places like Mahala al-Kubra, textile workers staged massive strikes as early as 2006. Bus drivers, sanitation workers, and port workers were demanding wages, dignity, and safety. And when these protests erupted into Tahrir, these workers brought strength and strategy. These strikes paralyzed entire industries. Suez became a center of resistance. The revolution was not just urban youth tweeting. It was laborers and mothers, fruit sellers and nurses. They were the backbone of the Egyptian nation. When President Hosni Mubarak stepped down on February 11, 2011, it was a seismic moment. After nearly 30 years in power, one of Arab's most entrenched autocrats was gone, toppled not by foreign armies or political assassins, but by the will of the Egyptian people that took the streets and were in Tahrir Square. But in that moment of victory, few understood who would truly take the reins. The military, specifically the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces known as the SCAF, assumed control of the country. On the surface, many Egyptians welcomed this, which wanted a change. The military had a long-standing image as a people's institution, a force that had refused to fire on protesters, that symbolized national pride, and that, in theory, would safeguard the revolution's goals. But what followed was not a democratic transition. It was a military management of a revolution. To understand what came next, you first have to understand Egypt's military-industrial complex. The Egyptian military isn't just a defense force, it's actually an economic empire. Estimates vary, but some suggest that the military controls between 25 to 60% of the Egyptian economy. They own factories, gas stations, construction companies, farms, you name it. This isn't just about soldiers and generals. It's actually about billions of dollars in untaxed, unregulated business ventures. So when the revolution threatened Egypt's political order, it also threatened vast economic interests. And while Mubarak's removal satisfied the streets and Tahrir, the generals were not about to let go of that influence. SCAF promised democratic elections, a civilian government, freedom. But what Egypt got was something completely different. SCAF began ruling by decree. The emergency laws remained in place. Protesters were arrested, beaten, and even killed. Over 12,000 civilians were tried in military courts in just the first year after the revolution. And that's more than during Mubarak's entire 30-year rule. Activists who had led chants to Tahrir originally were now being dragged before military judges. Bloggers like Michael Nabil were imprisoned for criticizing the army online. The message was clear. Criticize the old regime? Fine. Criticize the new military rulers? Unacceptable. Was this the revolution they had risked everything for? After the long, stressful, and painful period under the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, Egypt stood at a crossroads. The military had pledged to oversee a transition to civilian governance, but the path was fraught with challenges and skepticism. But, in response to mounting public pressure and widespread protests demanding an end to military rule, the SCAF finally announced that presidential elections would be held in June 2012, revising their earlier, more prolonged timeline. The elections were historic. For the first time, Egyptians had the opportunity to choose their leader in a competitive presidential race. The two leading candidates represented starkly different visions for the country. Ahmed Shafiq, a former Air Force commander and the last prime minister under Mubarak, symbolized continuity with the old regime. And on the other hand, Mohammed Morsi, representing the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party, embodied the Islamist movement that had long been suppressed. The runoff election was intensely polarizing. On June 24, 2012, after days of anxious anticipation, the Electoral Commission announced Morsi as the winner with 51.7% of the vote. The streets in Tahrir Square erupted in both celebration and apprehension. Morsi's victory was monumentous. He became Egypt's first democratically elected civilian president, marking the end of 6 decades of military dominance in the executive branch. However, the challenges ahead were formidable. The SCAF had implemented measures to retain significant powers, dissolving the Islamist-led parliament and curbing presidential authority just days before the election results. This power struggle between the military and newly elected civilian government set the stage for a turbulent chapter in Egypt's quest for democracy. The 2011 revolution was a testament to the Egyptian people's resilience and desire for self-determination. It showcased the power of collective action and the universal quest for dignity and justice. Yet, the journey was fraught with complexities. The interplay between revolutionary ideals and entrenched power structures led to the convoluted path with moments of triumph and setbacks. As we reflect on those transformative days, it's essential to recognize that the spirit of Tahrir Square endures. The echoes of chants, the murals on the walls, and the stories of countless individuals remind us that the pursuit of freedom is ongoing. Egypt's revolution was not an end, but a chapter in a continuing narrative of struggle, hope, and the unwavering quest for a better future. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you could learn something, and I am very thankful.